Hello everyone, you are listening to the Quick History Lesson Podcast. We hope the new year has been treating you well. As always, we are available on YouTube as well as other social media platforms. But if you haven't done so, please don't forget to press the like and subscribe button as we continue to do what we love, which is talking history. We truly appreciate the support. Today, we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a time to think about the life and lasting impact of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was born on January 15, 1929. This day is all about honoring a man whose bravery and vision sparked major changes in America during the Civil Rights Movement. Interestingly, the meaning of Martin Luther King Jr. Day has changed a lot over the years. During his lifetime, Dr. King faced huge challenges. He was jailed, attacked, and constantly watched. His fight for civil rights and social justice was met with a lot of resistance from many people in the U.S., and it ultimately led to his assassination in 1968. After he died, some folks tried to reshape or even downplay his legacy. Many remember him mainly for his I Have a Dream speech, without really grasping the deep context of his activism and the systemic issues he was battling. Historians note that he was a polarizing figure, and many people actually hated him while he was alive. Even Martin Luther King Jr. Day faced a lot of pushback since it was first proposed. When they first pushed for a federal holiday in honor of Dr. King, it had bipartisan support. But as things progressed, conservative pushback started to grow, leading to a long struggle in Congress, including filibusters. Critics argued that Dr. King was divisive, he had communist ties, and insisted he simply wasn't influential enough to deserve a national holiday. Some conservatives even brought up unsealed FBI tapes to back their claims. You see, the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover kept tabs on Dr. King from 1956 until he died, wiretapping him and trying to undermine the civil rights movement. We'll get into that later in the episode. Still, a lot of historians argue that these claims reflect the FBI's bias in their attempt to discredit King and the civil rights movement. Despite all the pushback, President Ronald Reagan eventually signed the bill to make Martin Luther King Jr. Day a federal holiday in 1983. Southern states chose to honor the Confederacy or Robert E. Lee's birthday instead. Over time, those states began offering options to either celebrate King's important contributions or pay homage to the Confederacy. South Carolina was the last state to officially recognize Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a paid holiday, finally doing so in 2000. As we think about this day, it's important to acknowledge not just what Dr. King accomplished, but also the hurdles he and his supporters faced in the fight for equality and justice. His legacy serves as a reminder of the ongoing struggle against racism and inequality, showing us that we all share the responsibility to continue to fight for the ideals that he stood for. With that said, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will focus on the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thanks for tuning in to the Quick History Lesson Podcast.
What I live for? Basketball, beats and bras, from Italy to the US. Yes, it's raw. I'm in search for the one to make my wealth feel born. Who can ignore the spotlight life from Blakemore? My downfall, have I found the ores that I search still? There's plenty of women set to appear with this feel. Can it complete the package? All I date is actresses to play it safe for them. My money ain't big, but I must take risks to find a honey that's legit. Whether she push a bucket or 6 bucks with some mad tips. I want her own or live out of moms and pops home. Rock stop fashion, Adidas attire or Timbos.
Welcome back to the second segment of the Quick History Lesson Podcast. We want to take a second to say thank you to everyone who's been following us during our journey. For those just tuning in, we hope you continue to do so. If you're enjoying our content, please don't forget to press and like that subscribe button if you haven't already, as well as follow us on our other platforms. Before we highlight the life of Martin Luther King Jr., I wanted to take this time to share some of my favorite films that really showcase his impact and legacy. In our next episode, we're going to discuss our favorite and least favorite historical films. Just a heads up, the movie Selma is definitely making my favorite list. I'll get into more on that in the next episode. But if you're in the mood for something that truly captivates MLK's spirit and activism, Selma is my top pick. If you're on the lookout for something more kid-friendly, I still have a soft spot for the animated film My Friend Martin from 1999. It really resonated with me as a kid, and has stuck with me ever since. It's a great way for young audiences to learn about Martin Luther King Jr.'s important message of peace and justice. Then there's Rustin on Netflix, which tells the story of Bayard Rustin. He wasn't just Dr. King's advisor and mentor, he also played a key role in organizing the 1963 March on Washington, among other things. We'll dive into his contributions in a future episode. So now let's switch back to the life of Martin Luther King Jr. He was actually born Michael King Jr. on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, coming from a family of strong spiritual roots. His mother, Alberta Williams King, was the daughter of a reverend, and his dad, Michael King Sr., was a well-known Baptist minister. Both parents were huge influences on his values. In 1934, King Sr., inspired by his experiences in Germany during the Baptist World Alliance tour, decided to change both his and his sons to Martin Luther King. This was all about honoring Protestant reformer Martin Luther and his commitment to reform, social justice, and equality. This is significant because his trip to Germany was during the time when anti-Semitism was on the rise amid the rise of the Nazi regime. In the summer of 1944, with World War II raging, Morehouse College opened its doors to high school juniors and seniors who could pass an entrance exam to help boost enrollment. At just 15, Martin Luther King Jr. jumped at the chance. He not only passed, but really shone academically, proving how dedicated he was. By 19, he earned a bachelor's degree in sociology to follow his dad's footsteps by going into ministry. In 1954, King became the minister at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, replacing Vernon Johns. This was a crucial moment for him and his future in civil rights activism. He was always hungry for knowledge and stayed dedicated to his cause, which eventually led him to earn a doctorate from Boston University in the summer of 1955. While at Boston University, he met Coretta Scott, who he would later marry, creating a partnership that would support and amplify his efforts for the rest of his life. We will end our second segment here. When we return, we will finish talking about the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is the Quick History Lesson Podcast.
Your reward will be great.
Hello. Do you want to play a game?
Whoopsie. Now, behold!
Welcome to the final segment of the Quick History Lesson Podcast. If you enjoyed our content so far, please don't forget to press that like and subscribe button, as well as follow us on our other platforms. Also, leave a comment in the comment section if you have any questions or things you'd like us to highlight in future episodes. We appreciate all the feedback and support. Now back to Dr. King. By 1958, after the successful Montgomery bus boycott and the prayer pilgrimage for jobs, Martin Luther King Jr. became a prominent figure in the civil rights movement. Unfortunately, this also meant he became a target of threats, arrests, harassment, and various attacks. In September 1958, at a book signing for his book Stride Towards Freedom in New York, a woman named Isola Curry, who was dealing with some mental health issues, approached him and stabbed him while accusing him of conspiracy with communists. Thankfully, King survived the attack and showed incredible resilience by forgiving her, which only strengthened his commitment to nonviolence. That next year, he took a life-changing trip to India to dive into Gandhi's teachings and the whole idea of nonviolent resistance. King had caught the FBI's attention by 1956. After his I Have a Dream speech at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the FBI started seeing him as a significant threat. In a memo, they even called him the most dangerous Negro of the future. As the late 50s rolled in, King was under heavy FBI surveillance. which led to even more harassment like wiretaps and evasive investigations based on claims of communist ties, all with some backing from Attorney General Robert Kennedy, adding to the pressure he was facing. Civil rights critics jumped on the communist allegations, using them as dirty tactics to undermine King's credibility. The FBI stepped up their game to discredit him too, throwing around claims about his personal life to damage his reputation with family, friends, and the media. Just before he was set to accept the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, he even received a chilling letter from the FBI suggesting he think about self-harm. But despite all the hostility, Dr. King continued his fight for civil rights. After the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, he began to extend his efforts towards poverty. He also started speaking out against America's involvement in Vietnam. In November 1967, King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference were gearing up for a demonstration in Washington, D.C. to rally a diverse group of Americans to pressure Congress to address poverty and housing issues. However, they had to pause the Poor People's March so Dr. King could support sanitation workers who were striking in Memphis. Sadly, it was during this trip that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in April of 1968. Many, including his family, believe that James Earl Ray, his assassin, was used as a scapegoat due to all the vitriol he faced. With that wraps up our episode on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, along with his life and legacy. Dr. King is one of the most important figures in American history and is still highly revered today. Lately, there have been efforts to dilute his legacy, ban books, and limit how he's taught in schools. So it's crucial now more than ever that we keep his legacy alive for future generations. In our next episode, we'll talk about Carter G. Woodson and Black History Month, as well as discuss our favorite and least favorite historical films. Thank you all for tuning in. This is the Quick History Lesson Podcast. Until next time.